So you have decided you want to own an apartment building. Buy the property, sign the tenants, collect rent every first of the month, and let the cash roll in while you sleep. Housing is not optional. People always need a roof. Leases renew themselves. The building stands there whether the stock market is euphoric or terrified. Compared to running a restaurant or a factory, it sounds almost boring in the best possible way. That is the dream. The problem is everything that happens in the gap between that dream and the actual mechanics of ownership. An apartment building is not a stack of leases with a roof on top. It is a regulated, debt-financed housing utility that happens to be disguised as real estate. It sells shelter, but underneath that sale sits financing, insurance, taxation, labor, regulation, and physical decay, all fighting for a share of the same rent check. On the surface, it looks passive. Underneath, it behaves like an operating business with a mortgage strapped to its back. That is precisely why this asset class pulls in such a strange mix of players. A schoolteacher who bought a fourplex with an FHA loan sits in the same market as a pension fund buying a 400-unit tower, an insurance company parking long-duration capital, and a private equity shop running a value-add playbook across a dozen states. Everyone sees the same rent roll. Nobody experiences the same risk. The visible product, an apartment with 4 walls and a kitchen, is simple. The financial system built underneath it is not. And the gap between those two realities is exactly where fortunes are made and where they quietly disappear. The fantasy usually starts with basic arithmetic. One tenant pays rent. Multiply that by 40 units, or 80, or 200, and the number on the page looks enormous. Rents will drift upward every year. A few units get renovated and released at a premium. The neighborhood gentrifies while tenants slowly retire your mortgage for you. It sounds almost too clean to be true, and that is usually the first warning sign in any business model. The first real complication shows up long before you ever meet a tenant, and it comes from the lender. Almost nobody buys an apartment building in cash. Even owners who could afford to rarely want that much capital frozen in a single address. So the transaction begins as a financing exercise, not a shopping trip. A lender studies the purchase price, the trailing net operating income, the physical condition of the property, local rent comparables, historical vacancy, and your specific business plan for the asset. What decides the deal is rarely how charming the lobby looks. What decides the deal is whether the income can service the debt, with room to spare if something goes wrong. This is where a concept called the capitalization rate enters, and it quietly controls almost everything else in the business. In plain terms, the cap rate is the unlevered yield a property throws off based on its current net operating income. If a building produces $800,000 of annual NOI, and the market is pricing similar assets at a 5.5% cap rate, that building is worth roughly $14.5 million. Push the required cap rate up to 7% because interest rates rose or buyers grew cautious. And the same $800,000 of income now supports a value closer to $11.4 million. Nothing changed inside the building. The tenants did not move out. The roof did not leak. Only the price the market is willing to pay for that income stream moved, and it moved by millions. Owning apartments, it turns out, is not only a bet on rent growth. It is a permanent, silent bet on financing conditions and investor appetite for income-producing real estate. Before any of that math matters, there is a gatekeeping layer most first-time buyers underestimate. Unlike launching an online business from a laptop, apartment ownership sits inside a dense web of lenders, brokers, appraisers, title companies, insurers, city inspectors, fire marshals, zoning boards, and in many cities, rent regulation boards. Capital alone does not get you through the door. The seller has to agree to terms. The lender has to underwrite and approve. The insurer has to be willing to write a policy at a price that still makes the deal work. The title has to be clean. The city may demand elevator certifications, LEED paint disclosures, fire suppression compliance, accessibility retrofits, and rental registration before a single new lease can legally be signed. In some cities, future rent increases are capped by statute regardless of your renovation budget. In others, an eviction for non-payment can take the better part of a year to complete through the courts. The real business begins long before the first maintenance call comes in. Now put a number on the entry price. Say you are chasing an 84-unit building in a solid secondary market. The asking price is $9.5 million. Add due diligence, physical inspection, Environmental review, appraisal, legal fees, loan origination costs, rate lock fees, title insurance, and transfer taxes, and you are looking at another $250,000 to $450,000 before you own anything. If part of your plan involves upgrading units and common areas, budget another $700,000 for renovations. Add working capital reserves of $250,000, because an owner who closes with an empty reserve account is not an investor. They are a landlord waiting for their first emergency. All in, the real capital requirement climbs closer to $11 million against a $9.5 million sticker price. Most buyers bridge that gap with a capital stack. A bank loan covering perhaps 68% of the purchase price, roughly $6.46 million, with the buyer contributing the rest in equity, which after closing costs and reserves lands closer to $3.7 or $4 million of actual cash out of pocket. The structure of that debt is not a technical footnote. It is the skeleton the entire business hangs on. Recourse debt lets the lender pursue you personally if the deal fails. Non-recourse debt limits that exposure, but usually comes wrapped in stricter covenants and carve-outs for fraud or mismanagement. Fixed-rate debt protects you from future rate shocks, but often costs more upfront. Floating-rate debt looks attractive while money is cheap, and can become punishing the moment rates move against you. Interest-only periods improve short-term cash flow, but delay the discipline of actually paying down principal. Every one of these choices reshapes how much stress the building can absorb before it breaks. Once you actually own the asset, rent is the obvious headline, but the real revenue stack has more layers than most outsiders assume. Base rent dominates in a healthy building, but a well-run property also monetizes reserved parking spaces, storage units, coin or app-based laundry, pet rent and pet deposits, application and late fees where local law allows them, utility reimbursement billed back to tenants, furnished unit premiums, and sometimes small recurring income from cable or internet provider agreements. A building with ground floor retail or rooftop telecom leases adds still more, but not all of this income carries equal weight. Base rent is sticky and contractual. Application fees evaporate the moment leasing slows down. Utility reimbursement only survives as long as your leases and local regulations permit it. Parking income can be resilient in a dense city and worthless in a suburban market with free street parking. A serious owner tracks not just total revenue, but which pieces of it are durable and which are decoration. On the other side of the ledger sits the cost machine, and this is where the passive income fantasy usually dies quietly. Property taxes tend to be the largest and least controllable line item, especially after a reassessment following a sale. Insurance has become brutally expensive in many regions over the last few years, with premiums doubling in flood, wildfire, or hurricane-exposed markets. Payroll covers property managers, leasing staff, maintenance technicians, and sometimes security. Utilities eat into margin whenever units are not individually metered. Repairs never stop. Landscaping and trash removal run every month regardless of occupancy. And every unit turnover carries cleaning, painting, and releasing costs. Above all of that sits capital expenditure, and this is where amateurs mistake a building for a bond. A bond does not demand a new roof in the middle of winter. A building does. Elevators need modernization, boilers fail, parking lots crack, and water intrusion can hide behind a wall for years before it shows up as a five-figure repair bill. The income statement can look calm right up until the year several of these deferred items land together. That distinction feeds directly into the central trap of this business. Net operating income, revenue minus operating expenses, is the number lenders and buyers obsess over, but owners do not actually live on NOI. They live on whatever survives after debt service and capital reserves. A building can post a healthy NOI and still hand its owner almost nothing in a given year if the debt is heavy or freshly repriced at a higher rate. Leverage is a magnifier, and magnifiers do not care whether they are amplifying a good year or a bad one. Watch what happens with real numbers. Take that 84-unit building, average rent $1,650 a month. Gross potential rent is about $1,664,000 a year. At 94% economic occupancy, effective rental income lands near $1,564,000. Add roughly $110,000 from parking, laundry, pet fees, and reimbursements, and total effective revenue reaches about $1,674,000. Subtract operating expenses. Taxes at $190,000, insurance at $95,000, payroll and management at $260,000, repairs and maintenance at $140,000, utilities at $95,000, and administration, marketing, and turnover at $130,000. Total operating expenses land near $910,000, leaving NOI of roughly $764,000. On paper, that looks like a genuinely healthy asset. Then debt service arrives at around $520,000 a year on the acquisition loan. Pre-capex cash flow drops to about $244,000. Set aside a capital reserve of $110,000 for the roof and mechanical systems waiting quietly down the road, and distributable cash to the owner lands near $134,000, against roughly $3.7 to $4 million of invested equity. That is a modest single-digit cash yield sitting underneath a property doing over $1.5 million of annual revenue. Now shift one assumption. New supply hits the submarket, occupancy slides from 94% to 88%, and concessions become necessary to keep units filled. Effective revenue drops by roughly $140,000. Insurance renews with a $35,000 increase. A reassessment adds $25,000 in property taxes. One unexpected plumbing failure adds another $50,000 in repairs. NOI falls from $764,000 to roughly $480,000. Debt service is still fixed at $520,000. The cushion is gone before a single dollar is set aside for capital reserves. Nothing catastrophic happened. No fire, no lawsuit, no scandal. Just four ordinary variables drifting slightly in the wrong direction at the same time, and a fully tenanted, well-located building has quietly stopped paying its owner anything at all. This is not a theoretical scenario. A version of it played out across parts of the Sunbelt apartment market in the years following the pandemic-era boom. A wave of buyers acquired older, undermanaged apartment complexes using short-term, floating-rate bridge loans, underwriting aggressive rent growth, and betting on renovation-driven value creation. When interest rates rose sharply through 2022 and 2023, the cost of servicing that floating debt jumped even though the principal balance barely moved. At the same moment, insurance premiums in storm-exposed regions spiked, construction costs stayed elevated, and a surge of newly built supply in the same submarkets softened rent growth right when it was needed most. Several of these portfolios could no longer cover debt service. Distributions to investors stopped, capital calls followed, and some properties ultimately moved into receivership or forced sale at values well below their purchase price. The lesson was never that people stopped needing housing. It was that a fragile capital structure does not care how strong underlying demand is. This is simply the modern version of a pattern that has repeated since the savings and loan crisis of the late 1980s and reappeared again during the 2008 downturn. Real estate rarely fails because the building falls down. It fails because cash flow, debt, and timing stop lining up. The other side of that coin is worth studying just as carefully. Large, professionally managed apartment operators, such as Avalon Bay Communities, have built decades of resilience through a very different set of choices. Concentrating in supply-constrained coastal and gateway markets, financing at conservative leverage levels, spreading procurement and management costs across hundreds of properties, and treating capital expenditure as a planned budget line rather than a surprise. Scale gives an operator like this negotiating power on service contracts, access to cheaper and more flexible capital, and the ability to recycle capital out of aging assets into newer ones. None of that makes every year effortless. It means the structure underneath the business is strong enough to absorb a bad year without breaking. The same discipline shows up in careful value-add investing at a smaller scale, where an owner buys an undermanaged property in a neighborhood with real long-term demand, improves it gradually, controls expenses tightly, and raises rents in step with genuine quality improvements rather than fantasy projections. Done this way with moderate leverage and a realistic purchase price, the upside comes from operations, not from hope. So what are you actually buying when you buy an apartment building? On the surface, it looks like a collection of kitchens, hallways, and rent checks arriving every month, backed by a need as basic as shelter itself. But the longer you hold it, the more the real structure reveals itself underneath the paint and the leases. You are not buying a passive stream of income. You are buying a leveraged housing system that has to keep rent, expenses, capital needs, debt costs, and time moving in the same direction all at once, for years without interruption. When those forces align, the building can quietly compound wealth for decades. When even two of them drift apart at the same moment, a fully occupied, perfectly ordinary building can leave its owner with almost nothing, without a single tenant ever noticing anything went wrong. You thought you were buying an apartment building. What you actually bought was a machine that only works when everything around it stays in balance.